All right, so we are now recording. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our second Fulbright Friday. Today we are going to be discussing strategies for graduate degree award applicants. I am Dr. Mitch Hamza, Senior Program Manager for Distinguished Graduate Fellowships at the Office of National Scholarships Advisement. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Lori Stoff, who I'll allow to introduce herself.
Hi all, I'm Dr. Stoff. I'm faculty advisor and assistant director of the Office of National Scholarship Advisement, and I'm a Barrett faculty member, and I'm here to help you on your Fulbright journey.
All right, thank you, Dr. Stoff. And then we're also joined today by one of our current Fulbrighters, Julia Jackman. Julia, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Julia Jackman. I graduated from ASU with bachelor's degrees in biochemistry and global health in 2021. And I moved to Norway through a Fulbright study and research grant in 2021 and was doing that grant from 2021 to 2022. And I have stayed in Norway for another year to finish up my master's degree. So 2 years in total, and I'm happy to be here today to share my experience.
Thank you so much for joining us, Julia. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure that our attendees are going to be really excited to hear about your different experiences. But before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to apply for a graduate degree award and some of the strategies that you might think about when you're thinking about applying to one. Right. So the Fulbright U.S. Student Program was created in 1946 by Congress as an act of international diplomacy. So think about at the end of World War II, there was a lot of international conflict. And so the solution that was proposed by Senator William J. Fulbright was to send everyday citizens abroad to act as diplomats with other everyday citizens in other countries, but to also have an exchange program. So other citizens from other countries could come study in the US and represent their countries. So I'm always reminded of a colleague of mine at Purdue University who was studying from Columbia, and he said that he found that his Fulbright experience was the best kind of public relations he could establish in trying to communicate and dismantle stereotypes that people had about Columbia as a country. And so Fulbright is really important in developing these kinds of international relations between everyday people, and that's a core tenet of their mission. So it is sponsored by the US Department of State. And as I said, its mission is to foster mutual understanding between nations. Most of these grants are going to be available for 9 to 12 months. There's over 2,000 grants awarded each year that will vary from year to year because there's always new grants being added. And there are 4 main types of awards available, which are going to be open study research. And open study research will include 3 different awards with it. And then there's also the Fulbright ETA grants. And we'll talk more about what those awards look like. And then there are over 140 participating countries. And as we'll learn today, everything can vary from country to country. So there is no universal grant for each country. Countries will have their own series of grants and what those look like, and they're highly individualized to what that country offers. This is our current application timeline for this cycle. So we've already gone past Fulbright Day at ASU. The applications did open on April 1st, so we're just now here getting started with the application process, and it will run from April through August. And so from April to August, if you are interested in applying to Fulbright, we encourage you all to make intake meetings, start getting drafting, and start revising your applications, particularly for the Open Study Research Awards and the Graduate Awards. They take a lot of time to finesse those applications. You'll want to work with your faculty advisors because they'll provide advice on how to talk about your field and research area, but you also want to work with advisors at ANSA because we really have in-depth expertise about what these readers are looking for and what makes a successful Fulbright application. That can't be done overnight. It can't be done in one first draft. It is something that takes a lot of work and revisions, and so you want to make time for that. So don't just look at this and go, oh, it's not due until September. Well, we have a lot of work that we need to put into it before September, particularly if you're applying to an Open Study Research Award, because your thinking will crystallize and refine over time. On September 12th, we'll have the campus deadline. What that means is we try to get your application as polished as possible for the ASU campus deadline. volunteer faculty will read over it, and then you'll have an interview with those faculty, and they'll ask you questions about your application, give you some feedback about how you can improve the application, and then you'll have some time to apply that feedback before the final deadline, which is in October. And those interviews may sound a little intimidating, but they're really not. It's really a conversation about you and your work. And overall, these faculty love being involved with this process. They love meeting new students and talking with them. And so it's a really good way to get some practice with talking about your research and why you want to have conduct a Fulbright. All right, so as I said previously, there are 4 different grant types. The 2 major grant types are the English Teaching Assistantship and the Open Study Research Awards. And then there are 3 subtypes for the Open Study Research Awards, which are the Graduate Degree Awards, Creative and Performing Arts, and Country-Specific Awards. And we'll talk more about the Graduate Degree Awards and Country-Specific Awards related to graduate study today. So that's going to be the focus of this presentation. But the advice presented here applies to study research awards in general, as well as and also the arts awards and many of the other country-specific awards. So while we are narrowing our focus to graduate degree awards, a lot of this is applicable to the other kinds of open study research awards. So some of the benefits of the Fulbright Graduate Degree Awards include the standard Fulbright benefits, which is traveling overseas, having a living stipend. If your country has some kind of requirement to live with a host family, that would fall within there too. So there are the standard Fulbright benefits. Sometimes they will include tuition support or a waiver. That's typical, but not all the time. So again, that varies from country to country. So there's a lot that's dependent on what each country is offering for their grant types. They're generally for 1 full year, but they can be extended, as Julia will talk about later today. And they can be submitted as an Open Study Research Award or as a country-specific award. And I'll get on the Fulbright website in a second and show you all how to differentiate between those 2 options. And it can, as I said, vary widely by country. And so you want to make sure that you're consulting the program summaries more than once. So, as you're doing your initial research and deciding which country and which program you'd like to attend, you're going to do that. You're going to just read over it and you're going to get a bigger sense of what it is. But when you choose your country, choose your program, you're going to want to go back and look at that country summary over and over again, because you will read it differently each time you look over it, because that information, you're just digesting it and processing it. And as you work through the application, it's so important to go back and reread those profiles. So this isn't just you pick the country once and never look at that country summary again. Lots of important information in there that you're responsible for as an applicant. And we'll get a preview of what that looks like. So this is the website for the U.S. Fulbright Student Program. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. And so this is what the general website looks like. There are a couple of different tools here. So you can just click on a region and then click on some of the countries within that region. There is also the award search feature. So if you want to get a little more specific, rather than just going by country, you can click on the award search feature, and that will take you to a screen that looks like this, where you can kind of compare different countries side by side. These filters can be really helpful. So for example, if you're like, I want to do study research and I want them to have graduate degree enrollment, then you click on that, make sure the blue checks are there, and then you'll see which countries offer graduate degree enrollment. So there's Argentina, Australia. Australia has a couple of different awards, and we'll talk more about open study research versus the specific degree awards. Austria, Belgium, so you can get the side-by-side comparison to see what each country is offering. And that way, that also helps you kind of filter out which countries don't offer these awards, rather than going country by country. That can become very onerous and time-consuming just by looking at each country profile. So when you look at a country profile, let's see, I selected Taiwan, for example. You'll see that there's sometimes a lot of different options. Taiwan has a ton of options here, which is one reason why I chose it. And so usually at the top, we'll have the English Teaching Assistant Awards. That's not what we're talking about today, so you'll just go right past that. And then you'll see that there are awards for different master's degree programs. So they have a master's degree in the National Taiwan Normal University Award in International Human Resource Development, an MBA. So if someone was interested in that, they could click on that and go look at the profile for that specific degree program. There's also one for brand and fashion management. So again, these are hyper-specific degrees, and they can be more specific overseas than they are in the US. So in the US, someone who's like, I'm just going to go get a master's in history, and then they attend a university and get a master's degree in history. Whereas these kinds of master's degrees in these for these one-year programs overseas are going to be very hyper-specific in what they're focused on. And so it's really important for you to find a degree program that's a really, really good fit for you. However, there is also the option to be able to conduct, to plan your own course of graduate study at a university. So you don't necessarily have to follow one of these hyper-specific degree plans. So if you're like, I just want to go study at a graduate school overseas, I don't see a specific degree program that's being offered there. Can I choose a program at a university and still send in an application? The answer is that depends on the country and what they offer. So how you find that out is you can go to the country's profile. So if we go to Austria, for example, we'll see that they do have a couple graduate awards. So there is like the Marshall Plan Foundation Award for Research in Science and Technology. There's also the Diplomatic Academy Student Award, hyper-specific awards. But if you're thinking about, I just want to go to a university in Austria, I found a graduate program I really like there, I want to see if I can propose attending there, you'd click on the Open Study Research Award, and you would scroll down to Fulbright proposal types. And so it'll tell you that they do support independent study research. That's for anyone proposing their own research project, but they do not support graduate degree enrollment. So you cannot enroll at a university in a graduate program that isn't one of the degree types that they offer on the other page. So you just can't pick your own program for Austria. However, for Italy, if you go to their Open Study Research Awards, you will see for Fulbright proposal types, they accept both independent study research and graduate degree enrollment. So for Italy, if you did find a program at a specific university, you found a faculty member that you'd like to work with, the coursework really meshes well with what you want to do and what you want to learn, then you could write a proposal to be able to study in that program and be able to get a Fulbright to study in that program. So that's kind of the difference between the two approaches. It can be a hyper-specific degree, such as the examples that we looked at with Taiwan, but it can also be something that you find on your own and make a proposal for, if the country allows you to conduct graduate degree enrollment there. And one other thing I wanted to add, as you're looking at these degree types too, you'll see that there's these numbers on the side, and that tells you how many of those awards are allowed in a specific year. So for this year, there's going to be 16 Open Study Research Awards for Italy. That can give you an idea of how competitive they are. So if we look at Taiwan, we'll see that a lot of these award types, it's just one person in the world is going to get these grants. And so those can be more hyper competitive. And there are statistics online to kind of figure out how many people are applying to these, how many are awarded each year. But we encourage you to look at those numbers with an advisor rather than looking at them on your own, because there's a lot of context to unpack there that you can't immediately see or understand as an applicant. And so that's something that we do, is we walk you through what else to think about as you're reading through those numbers. Right. So most of the study research awards are going to require some kind of affiliation. And what that means is it's like a letter from a sponsor, a letter from either a lab or a faculty member that says, I will work with the student. I've read over their proposal, they've talked to me, they've communicated with me, and should they receive the Fulbright, I'd be more than happy to work with them. So this communicates to the Fulbright Commission that you're not just flying off to another country and you don't have any point of contact there to get started on your research project. But for the graduate degree awards, this will typically be admission to the graduate program. You have to apply to the graduate program separately from Fulbright. So you don't just apply to Fulbright and say, I would like to attend graduate school in Australia. You have to apply to the specific graduate program through the university's website and through their own admissions process. And oftentimes, again, this is another thing that's dependent from country to country, Fulbright does not communicate with the graduate degree program. So they they don't talk about admissions with each other. But for you to, if Fulbright gives you the award, you have to be admitted by the program independently to be able to accept the award and be able to go overseas. So there's there's two parts to this process, excuse me. The application for admission is made after Fulbright. Again, you're going to want to look at the university's website, find out what their deadlines are, and make sure that you submit all your materials by those deadlines. There are horror stories out there of students not applying to the graduate program after they've submitted their Fulbright application and they get the Fulbright. And that's a tough pill to swallow when something like that happens, right? And we don't want that to happen to any of you. And the Fulbright awards are contingent upon admission to the graduate program, as I already said. So you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, that you understand what the application process is for the university and how that is going to go alongside your application to Fulbright. Two different application processes. So how do you go about selecting a graduate study program? So the first question that committees are going to consider is why this country? They really want to know, why are you applying to work in that country? And you have to have a really good answer for that. And there has to be a compelling reason for you to conduct your study in the proposed host country at that specific university. So if it's one of those programs in which that's the one degree that's offered in the world, that's a pretty convincing argument, but not as convincing as saying, this is why I need this degree. Here's how it helps me fulfill my desired impact. Here's how it helps me fulfill my specific career goals. Because it is about you. Every other applicant can say, this is the only degree like this offered in the world. So we still need to make that a personalized, individualized argument for why you need to be in that country, why you need that degree program, and what you're going to do with it afterwards. And the choices that are offered to you at that university in that country must be superior to those in the US. So it should not be a degree that you should be able to get into the US. It should not be a similar program. Again, you want to think about, why are you working in this country? How does your research interact with the host country's interests? How does it interact with their values or their culture? How will it improve relations between the host country and the US? There's a lot of different factors to think about here, but always go back to the main mission of Fulbright, which is of establishing mutual understanding with other countries and other cultures. And that is something that takes a lot of work. So remember, I said earlier, we can't just write a draft of this 2 weeks before it's due, right? This is something that you're going to get asked a lot of questions about from advisors at ANSA, and we work with you on coming up with a really good answer for this. So if you're sitting here going, yeah, I know I want to study in Italy, but I don't know why. Well, have a conversation with us and we'll help you learn why, right? That's what we're here for. So all other considerations for why we should award a Fulbright to someone is subordinate to the core Fulbright mission. So it always comes down to establishing mutual understanding through cultural exchange. There is no way of skirting around that or getting past that. Some plans of study, such as the humanities, languages, and social sciences, are going to speak directly to this mission. So it's really easy to say, I study literature. Literature is a way of establishing mutual understanding between cultures. Here's how my plan to study literature in your country is going to help facilitate that. That's a pretty easy argument to make. It will take some nuance. That's a simplified argument. However, someone in STEM might take a little more work, finessing, massaging to be able to come up with that connection, depending on the goal of the STEM research, depending on the broader impacts of the STEM research, right? But overall, no matter what you're doing, it should contribute to the goal of Fulbright, which is to establish mutual understanding through cultural exchange. Other key selection factors include the validity and feasibility of the proposed work. Validity means, is this valid research in your field? Is this something you can do in your field? And do you have the expertise to conduct this research or this graduate study in your field? Feasibility of the proposed work is, can you complete the degree, right? So one thing that's really important when putting together a graduate school application is to demonstrate that you are a student who can complete the graduate degree, right? And so it's really important to focus on how you have established your ethos and credibility as a student, and how your audience will know that you can go abroad and succeed in this degree program should they fund you to do so. So this means really pulling out and establishing your academic or professional qualifications. How are you qualified to attend this graduate degree program? Language proficiency will vary from country to country. And what that means is some countries are going to have English programs. So Taiwan, for example, some of those degree programs are taught in English. With the continuing global spread of English, there are more of these programs cropping up every year. And if you study in Australia or the UK, of course, they're going to speak English there, which is one reason why they're super hyper competitive to get into those degree programs. Other times, the coursework may not be taught in English, and so you will need some language proficiency to be able to do that. And as Dr. Mox pointed out on Fulbright Day, this is not something that we can bluff. You will have to take some kind of English language exam, and you will have to, not a foreign language exam, I'm sorry, the FLE, and you will have to demonstrate your proficiency on 4 different levels. And that's something that we can also guide you through that process too. So you can't bluff your way through the language proficiency if it's required, and that's something that you can find out by looking at the country summary. Community engagement is incredibly significant because, again, think about how we're fulfilling the mission of the Fulbright, right? It's not just going abroad to study. It's not just going abroad to conduct research. It's going abroad to fulfill that diplomatic mission. And so how you propose, how you're going to engage with the community is a substantial part of your application. And then they also care about the previous experience in country. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a future slide. But your previous experience in a country can dictate the success of an application, and sometimes in ways that you may not expect. And they also care about diversity. They want to send a broad representation of what it means to be a US citizen abroad. And how they understand diversity can include identities such as being from a marginalized background, but it can also mean being a first-generation student and other kinds of factors that make you different from other students that they'd be sending abroad. And so that's something that's really important to pull out in your personal statement. What makes you unique and what kind of separates you from the other students who are applying, so that your readers can get a good sense that they're sending forth a diverse representation of what it means to be an American. All right, so as I mentioned previously, the first and most important factor of validity is the validity of your proposed study. So how does this, they measure the validity of the proposed study by thinking about how it fits within the program itself, right? But also your ability to fulfill that. And they also want to see that it reflects the Fulbright's mission. So this shouldn't be research that does not somehow relate to the mission, does not support the mission, makes it really hard for readers to understand why Fulbright is appropriate for this, right? So there should be a clear connection between what you're proposing and the kinds of study that you want to do abroad, and how it relates to the Fulbright's mission. And should also relate to your personal and professional goals. So it should make sense based on your past. Why is this the next logical step for you? But it should also make sense on your projected future, right? Something I always tell applicants is that we're not signing anything in blood here. So what you're saying, what your career goals are here, may not be what you end up doing with your career 10 years from now, right? But we're giving some kind of projection, a narrative that can demonstrate that you know, you have an idea of where you're going, where you want to end up, and how Fulbright is the next step there. So how does this fit in with your goals, and how are you prepared to meet those goals? So you're not just switching fields midstream here, but instead you have a logical trajectory that makes sense for the program that you're proposing. Again, why is it best accomplished in this location with the resources at that university? And is the project compelling and timely? So is it something that people care about now? And specifically, is it something that the State Department should care about now? Why should the State Department give you money to go abroad to study this topic? The national screening committees can generally be pretty ambivalent about topics, so there isn't really a preference of, STEM over the humanities. There's nothing like that, but you must convince them of the relevance of your study, either to the field of study, your own career, or society at large, or all three. So there are many different ways to approach how you convince the National Screening Committee that your research is compelling, timely, and should matter to them. As for feasibility, they want to make sure that you are well prepared for the program. So how are you prepared? What courses have you taken to prepare you for this program? What extracurricular activities have you taken to prepare you for this program? If research is involved in the program, do you have undergraduate research experience you can draw from or illustrate? And so your rec letters and your applications should demonstrate that you are a capable student who can conduct the plan that you are proposing. They also want to know if the timeline is reasonable, that you're not putting too much on your plate for what you're trying to get done within that plan of graduate study. So how many courses are you taking? If there is a thesis or dissertation component, what does that look like? Do you have some initial ideas about the questions that you're asking for that? You don't have to outline and come up with a whole proposal in your statement of grant purpose, but you might want to give some indication about what kinds of questions you're asking and how you can try answering them while you're there. But also, I think it shows a great degree of intellectual maturity to be able to demonstrate what you need to learn to be able to do what you want to do in the future, right? So what are some of the gaps in your own development? Maybe you need to learn how to conduct certain kinds of studies. Maybe you want to learn how to conduct a certain kind of research method or get more strength with working with a certain kind of research methodology. Those are things that you would name as part of your development plan in that timeline. And they also want to know if you have the necessary training, language proficiency, cultural awareness, right? So if one is conducting qualitative, wants to go abroad, and they're like, I want to become a sociologist. I found the sociology degree abroad, and I'm really interested in getting to know people's stories and interview them. Well, that varies from culture to culture on what that kind of interaction can look like and what people are willing to talk about. And so can you demonstrate the cultural awareness of how you would conduct that research or conduct that area of study abroad? In addition to that, they will also consider transcripts, references, and your CV, everything that you enter. So this isn't just based on the actual two documents, the personal statement and statement of grant purpose, but they're looking through feasibility throughout the entire application. So again, you want to think about all the materials that you're sending in are kind of like a chorus that shows and demonstrates who you are as an applicant. And so every one of those things should contribute to the feasibility of your proposed plan of study. Right. So as far as your academic or professional qualifications, readers are really going to want to see someone who's highly qualified for admission to the target graduate program. This better be the best program for you, and you better be a really good fit for it. And so they really care about those academic qualifications more so than other types of Fulbright awards. So for study research or for the ETA, academic qualifications might not matter so much, but for here, you're applying to study at an academy. So your academic qualifications really matter. You should be an outstanding candidate for admission. Fulbright is not a side door into getting into a highly competitive graduate program. For example, in the United Kingdom, it actually is very difficult to land one of those grants. So you have to be a really strong applicant. And again, how you become a strong applicant is not just based on your own background and area of study and how that all fits together. It's largely that, but it's also what the application looks like. And so we can, again, help advise you on what programs might be a good fit for you, have conversations, and help you put your best foot forward with your application. Candidates of varying degree levels or professional experience are not compared. So for example, if someone is an undergraduate who just got their bachelor's degree and is applying to a master's program, as opposed to someone who is a PhD student who is going abroad to maybe study for a year in another program, they're not going to compare those students side by side at the National Screening Committee. They are instructed to compare applicants to their peers. And so that's something important that's also to consider too, is to demonstrate that you are a good candidate in comparison to your own peers. All right, so the other qualifications that include language proficiency, it's really important that it is commensurate with the needs of the program. So again, look at the country profile, find out what they want, and you have to meet their minimum requirements, but you also want to potentially demonstrate that you exceed those minimum requirements. So for example, if a country says that it's recommended but not required to have a certain level of proficiency, you should be at that recommended level of proficiency in order to be a competitive applicant. You also have to use that language beyond just studying. They want you to be able to use the language to communicate with the people of the host country. And so having conversational ability is a big plus, even if it is not required. I personally can attest to this. I went on a research grant in Colombia, did not know very much Spanish. My life was not easy while I was there, right? You definitely want to have some language study and the proficiency before you go abroad. So if you don't have it now, it's a good time to start working on the language that you want to learn before you take that foreign language exam or evaluation. And again, we assess that with the foreign language evaluation. So you work with a faculty member at ASU, they fill out a form and they score you based on what they tested you on in that evaluation. And then we send that in with the Fulbright application. And we have a list of those faculty members, and that's something that we can coordinate with you when you are getting ready for that step. All right, a substantial part of the Fulbright application is community engagement. How are you going to meaningfully interact with the citizens and denizens of your host country? So you're not just going there to study. They want to know that you have specific plans in order to meet people, engage with people, share your culture, share things that you really want people to know about America with them, and they want to know those plans. If you are applying to a graduate award program, you will have a much better sense of what exact city and university and location you will end up in, as opposed to some other grants, such as the ETA grant, in which you apply to a country at large, but you don't know where you're going to get assigned in the country. With the graduate awards, you do know where you're going to end up in the country. So you want to come up with a solid plan. So for example, I once worked with an applicant who volunteered for Habitat for Humanity in the US. She found chapters of Habitat for the Humanity in the country that she was applying to, and she proposed that as her community engagement. She would go and build houses while in country, and that's what she ended up doing, and it was successful. So you want to be specific. You don't want to overthink it. And don't propose something that isn't a good fit for you, right? So if you don't exercise, maybe don't propose that you're going to participate in a triathlon, right? You want to demonstrate that you have the capabilities to be able to engage with people in that way, but also the focus is on engagement. So we all want to go hiking in Italy, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're talking with people while we go hiking, right? It has to be communicative, it has to be ongoing, it has to be substantive. And that is something that we can help you brainstorm and work on in our office. They also consider your reviewers will consider extracurricular activities and evidence of social consciousness as to whether you can fulfill the community engagement that you're proposing. And you will discuss this in your abstract. It will also be discussed in the CCE and in the essays itself. So there are many different places in the application in which you will touch on this aspect. That's very important to the Fulbright audience. All right, so with all other factors being equal, which they seldom are, right? We're rarely ever on equal footing with any other applicant in a pool, right? Candidates with little or no previous experience in a country are generally preferred over those who have experience. That's just kind of the general rule. The idea here is not to send someone who's lived in a host country for 6 years back to the country on Fulbright, right? We want to give, or the National Screening Committee wants to give those opportunities to people who may not have had access to them previously. And so the idea here is to plant new seeds for cultural engagement. However, experience is considered significant time in country. So if you conducted study abroad, if you've had an internship that was a couple months long, or military deployment to a country previously, it doesn't count as experience. What they really mean is whether you've lived in a country extensively, interacted with the culture extensively. However, applicants with that experience do often have an advantage because they know the language, they know the culture, they can navigate it well. And so this isn't like an either or position here, right? You either don't have previous experience and you're going to do better than someone who does, or you have previous experience and you're not going to do as well as someone who doesn't, right? It really depends on the greater context of the award. It depends on the context of you as an applicant and what you offer as an applicant. But this is something that the National Screening Committee does consider when they're making their decisions. All right, as far as diversity, what's going to signal diversity to the National Screening Committee as US geographic distribution. So where in the US are you from? We don't want to just send everyone from New England abroad, right? We want to make sure that we are sending a diverse pool of Americans abroad. Also US institution distribution. So the goal here is not to send people from Ivy League universities abroad. We want to make sure that we're sending a representation of different students from different areas of the country in different institutions. They also will care about ethnic, racial, and socioeconomic diversity. So that's something to talk about in some way in your personal story and your personal statement, right? Whatever you want to disclose to your readers is your business and your choice. But we do want to give them a sense of who you are, what you're about, and how you represent certain perspectives of American culture. And also field of study. So we don't want to send everyone in STEM abroad, right? They also are very considerate of what fields and what disciplines are represented overseas. So do lean into your background and consider what people can learn about you, both as an individual, as a student, and what makes you unique among your peers. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the essays. So there is the statement of grant purpose, which is a 2-page essay, standard formatting, and it's going to outline the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your Fulbright year. So this is really where you're talking about why are you proposing to go on a Fulbright? What are you going to do while you're there? This is the real technical, practical document of the application. There shouldn't be any abstractions in this document, right? Everything is very detailed, very practical. But it's also going to indicate your commitment to the host country community. So this is another area where you're going to discuss your community engagement and plans to engage with the host community. So some of the questions that readers are going to want to be able to answer after reading the statement of grant purpose is what your career objectives are and why they should care about them, right? So it isn't just enough to say, I want to study in Italy so that I can sell designer handbags in the future, right? We want to convince the committee that selling designer handbags is a great way to facilitate cross-cultural interaction or something like that. Like, we want to make the National Screening Committee care about your goals. And they also want to know about your specific career objectives and what draws you to that specific graduate program. So thinking about how this is the next logical step in your development. They also want to know in what other ways does this graduate program stand out from others like it. So again, making that argument that this is unique, this is the best fit for you. A lot of this is going to be about fit. They want to see that you name notable faculty members in the program. You're not just saying, I'm applying to this program, thank you. You want to say, I plan to work with this faculty member, they teach these classes, they have this research area. It would really help me learn how to conduct this kind of research or to gain this kind of expertise by working with this specific individual or these set of individuals. They want to see that you've done your homework about the program. And that is one way that you demonstrate that you've done your homework. They also want to get a sense of what the curriculum requires and what courses you will take. The National Screening Committee in the US in particular will not know the ins and outs of these graduate programs. So it is your job to describe to them what the curriculum is all about and which courses you will take. You can't leave your readers to fill in any gaps here. If they have questions, they can't ask you the questions, and they're not certainly going to go look on the website to answer it themselves. And they also want to get a sense of what the academic year looks like. What is the timeline? This will vary from institution to institution. And so they want to get a sense of what you're going to do while you're there. Other key questions that the National Screening Committee will want to be able to answer is, in what way has your previous academic study prepared you for this program? So what have you learned with your previous degree programs that prepares you for this one? And what are your qualifications for doing this, for conducting this study in this area of study? They also want to know in what way your study will contribute to Fulbright goal promoting cultural exchange and mutual understanding. So again, this isn't just learning for learning's sake, but learning so that you can promote cultural exchange and mutual understanding. They want to know what's notable about the location of the university, given your career goals and the Fulbright mission, and how you'll engage with the host country community. And they want specific ideas for civic engagement. And they also want to know what you're going to be able to do at the completion of the award. What will you do next? So this isn't just, I'm going abroad, getting a degree, that's it. But they want to know where do you want to take that degree? What do you want to do with it? What are your plans? You probably don't want to say that you want to work on a specific floor of the Pentagon. That's too hyper specific, but give them a sense of where you're going with all of that. Great. I'm going to share a link in the chat if you just give me a second, and it is to this document that we have on the screen. So what this is it is a matrix designed by our director, and it is a sheet that you can use to keep track of different graduate degree programs. So if you're shopping around, trying to figure out which country or which programs you want to apply to, you can keep track of that data here. And use it to compare the different programs. Sorry, I paused there because I can't actually copy the link from my notes, so I will make sure to share that in the chat once I'm done screen sharing. All right, so just as a review, what they really care about when they're evaluating the graduate degree programs is location, key faculty, reputation of the university, admissions requirements, curriculum, facilities, and community engagement. So these are all factors that you want to consider and represent in your application. And now we're going to take a second to look at an abstract. And Julia, I think we want to get a chance for you to talk. I've been talking a lot. So these are some abstracts, and you can look at these samples with us in office. But this is Julia's abstract. So this will give you a sense of how she proposed her area of graduate study. And then Julia, do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about how you chose this specific program?
Yeah, sure. So I knew that I wanted to study global health. And similar to what we just saw on the screen, the form that you can kind of fill out to look at different graduate study programs, I did that. And I spent months over the summer kind of systematically going country by country, looking at almost all global health programs I could possibly find. Because I knew I wanted to go abroad with something like global health. I felt like the international experience was essential to what I want to do in the future. So yeah, I kind of systematically went through every program I could find and found a research center in Norway that just had my heart immediately when I saw the types of projects that they were working on. And I sent an email one day and I was just like, hi, this is who I am. I would love to contribute to your research in A, B, and C ways. Would it be possible for us to meet up to chat about that possibly? And I got an email the next day from the supervisor, and we chatted for an hour and felt like it was a good fit. We ended up writing the letter, the affiliation letter. And so for me, I think I got really lucky with just finding a supervisor who was really, really supportive and eager to help students like myself. But I also think that I spent a lot of time, countless hours beforehand trying to find the perfect program. And so I think once I did reach out, it was a really good match for both of us. So that was a little bit about that. I feel like everybody kind of asks, all the Norwegians I meet, they're like, why did an American decide to come to Norway? What's that all about? And I mean, there are many reasons, but I always go back to it's this research center that I'm working at. That was the draw. And then I learned so much more about Norway, and I fell in love with the country as well on top of it. And I wrote a lot about that in my grant as well. But fundamentally, it was the research and the graduate program.
Thank you so much, Julia. I do have a couple other questions, but I do want to give our attendees a chance to ask you questions too. So does anyone have any questions for Julia that they'd like to ask about her experience in Norway or her experience about applying to Fulbright?
Hi, yeah, I have a question if that's okay.
Please.
So I'm reading your open study research paper or your little thesis here, and it looks like you did 2 years or so in Norway. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, did you have to, was your Fulbright application covering both years at once, or did you have to do a year by year application?
Yeah, great question. So Fulbright only funds a year. Fulbright Norway, at least, will only fund a year of graduate study. And so in my statement of grant purpose, I had to be explicitly clear about why I wanted that first year to be funded. I did not really focus on the second year, and instead I focused on this project, which I felt like I could complete in 1 year. And then because the graduate program is 2 years in length, I focused a lot on how the first year was focused on biostatistics and epidemiology and how I would kind of learn the methodology that I needed to continue another project the second year, which is the thesis that I'm currently working on. Unfortunately, yeah, Fulbright Norway does not offer extensions of awards for a second year. So I was kind of on my own there, which was a bummer, but in the end, it was not a big deal because the stipend that I got was enough for me to stretch 2 years. And on top of that, graduate programs in Norway are 100% tuition free. Unfortunately, the government just changed that. So moving forward, it won't be like that. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
One question we had in the chat was if it was intimidating. So either going abroad or if the application itself ever felt intimidating.
Yeah, great question. Yes, for sure, both. The application I felt like was a really intimidating process at first. I remember sitting here in April. It had just been like a month after the pandemic started, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I don't even know what I want to do with my graduate study. I knew I was interested in global health, but there were so many things that I wanted, I guess, out of life in the future. I didn't really know which path to go down. So that was really intimidating to kind of try to figure out like what exactly it was that I wanted to do and where that would be. I think kind of just taking it day by day is really helpful. I started early and I was in constant communication with ANSA throughout the summer and throughout the year also, which was super helpful because then I could just send like every draft their way and get some small feedback rather than like rushing everything in July and August when everybody else is also rushing their applications. So I think it can be a lot less intimidating by starting early and just trying to, take it one piece at a time. And you'll get there, I promise. Yes, start early.
Yes, please start early, everyone. You'll feel like, oh, I have the whole summer to do it, but that whole summer goes by so quickly. And you will regret not starting early later. So we try to avoid regrets in our office.
Yeah, and I also want to say for finding the affiliate, I think starting early on that is super important, especially if you want to go to Europe. I'm not really sure how it is in other continents, but they take basically all of July off. And so, or a lot of people will do, especially in Norway. And so, if you weren't trying to get in contact with people in June, in July, you cannot get answers from people, then you're kind of left with just August to try to find a supervisor. So just, I guess, be cognizant of that and give yourself way more time than you would expect for getting that affiliation.
All right, what other questions do we have, folks? Do we have any other questions about Fulbright or for Julia?
Hi, Julia. I have one question.
Yeah.
So have you finished your entire graduate program yet? Are you on the verge of finishing?
Yes, I'm currently spending every waking hour working on my thesis. So I'll be graduating in just the very end of May. So in the final stretch here.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. And I wanted to ask, because I'm always interested in people's answers, but looking forward after graduation, how will you use like your Fulbright experience and the abroad experience for your next steps after you graduate?
Yeah, for sure.
If you know.
Great question. Yeah. I actually just accepted a job offer for next year. So I am going to be applying to medical school, but it's like a whole year-long process. So I will be doing that concurrently with the job that I just accepted, which is with a cancer research center in New York City. And I'll be working on the Global Cancer Disparities Initiative. So I'll be spending a couple months in New York, and then I will be moving to Nigeria for the rest of the year. So about 9 to 10 more months. So it kind of feels like another Fulbright experience in some ways, but getting paid a little bit more to do it. And I think, I mean, Fulbright was such a huge component of my application to that job. And from their feedback that they had given me, like they knew that I have been in a situation where I didn't know anybody, was in a very unfamiliar place, had to start over from scratch, and really kind of take a lot of those skills I think were applicable to the job that I had applied to. So and the name Fulbright I think carries a lot of weight, so that certainly helps to have that on your applications. But I think just having experience in hearing new perspectives, challenging yourself in so many different ways, personally and professionally, gives you transferable skills to any job, no matter what it is, even if it's not another international job like what I'll be doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question.
All right, we have a question in the chat from Tanya. So she wants to know if this can be parlayed into working with bridging gaps from country to country in the field you are interested in after Fulbright. Yeah,
I would say so, for sure. I mean, Fulbright, as we said, the mission is really trying to bridge cultures, and that is exactly what you're doing. You'll get a lot of questions while you're abroad about America and about culture, about politics, and so yeah, there's a lot of cultural exchange that goes on, and I think, yeah, for sure, after Fulbright, that those skills transfer, especially if you're interested in moving to another country. You can talk about how you've had this entire year to kind of practice that. So I definitely think it helps you get your foot in that. They're skills that you'll have for the rest of your life as well. So it's not just this one year that you get the chance to do that.
All right, thank you, Julia. Austin, I saw you had a question. Did you want to go ahead and ask it?
Yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask one more. So I will be this summer actually, spending my summer studying abroad in a sister country to one of the countries I was looking at for Fulbright for language development. And I know earlier you had said something about students spending time in that country. It could be hazardous to their application. Would that be a problem for someone like me who already is in a sister country to the one I'm looking at?
Well, they don't use the term hazardous. What they say is a competitive disadvantage. That's the term that Fulbright specifically uses. And so I would say that's a better question to have in a one-on-one advising appointment, in which we can talk about how to what that specifically looks like for that specific country, because I think that's a really specific contextual question. But I would say it depends on the country, really.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions that we have? All right, well, Julia, I do have a question for you. Do you mind going into a little bit more about how you conducted community engagement? So what did you propose, and how has that worked out for you so far?
Yes, yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I got connected to another American student who did the same global health degree program while I was applying to Fulbright. And that was super helpful because he was already a student. He knew what types of clubs and organizations were relevant, and kind of suggested a few to me. One was something called the International Student Festival in Trondheim. Trondheim is the city that I'm studying in. And it's this international festival that brings like over 500 students from like 100 different countries to Norway every other year to discuss a specific theme. And so I sounded really relevant and interesting. I proposed that I would do that in my grant proposal, knowing that it was something I found interesting, but I was like, with everything in your proposals, like it's not, I think as was said earlier, you're not like, signing your life away that is exactly what you're going to be doing. And then once I got to Norway, they started to recruit, and I was like, oh, I don't know if like I have the time to do this, or like I'm already overwhelmed with things, should I do it? But I was like, okay, I wrote it in my proposal, I'm gonna do it, like it sounds fun, and I did it, and oh my gosh, it was the best, the highlight, I think, for sure, of my Fulbright year and my time in Norway. It's kind of interesting, but I was really stuck in kind of an international bubble for the first 6 months that I was in Norway. My graduate study program was like 90% foreigners, and those were mostly the people that I was interacting with. But getting involved in this community organization, the festival, really gave me such a strong sense of Norwegian community, and my best friends now have come from that. So I think for my suggestion for that would be to try to talk to somebody who's already there, who might have a greater familiarity with the types of community events that are going on, and give you some suggestions, because I think it really strengthened my proposal. And actually I ended up having to get some grant funding for that, for the project to happen the way it was supposed to, for this festival to work out. And I applied for some more funding through the embassy, the Norwegian US embassy, I guess, and they ended up giving it to me. I think a lot of it was the Fulbright connection as well. So yeah, I don't know. It's just do your research on the connections. You'll find some good ones.
Thank you so much for sharing, your insights and your experiences today, Julia. I mean, I think you are a clear representation of what it means to seize an opportunity, right? And how you are trying to figure out how to work best within the country and culture, and really take full advantage of your opportunity there. So thank you so much for sharing everything today. I hope everyone gains something from your experiences.
No, of course, no problem at all. And I'll put my email in the chat if anybody has any questions or wants to see my full application or anything. More than happy to help out with that.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, just in case anyone has any questions that they don't want to ask while we're being recorded, and I can hang out a couple more minutes.